Hi everyone, it's Ren here. How you doing, guys? Today I'm going to take as my topic for the video a suggestion from Basma. Hi Basma, who mentions possibility of talking about INFJs and children, or INFJs as children. And I actually immediately thought that this was a great topic, though a slightly daunting one perhaps, because Jesus Christ, I don't know if I can. Did I just swear there? I'm sorry. I don't know if I can have a theory, or if I can have some kind of expert, or not even necessarily expert, but like, coherent account of what it means to be an INFJ and as a child, except, and this is rather fortunate, by using my own experience, because as things stand, I happen to be an INFJ, so I can rely on this vast store of memories about my past history, if that is not a redundant expression. I was once corrected in Geneva for using the expression past history. Oh, this is a pleonasm. Well, I guess it is. But nevertheless, INFJ children. It's a very good topic, because regardless of how difficult it is for me to talk about this outside of by relying on my own experience as a child, and therefore I'm probably going to spend quite a bit of this video mentioning this experience. I must say that, if there is one period in my life that was formative for developing a sense of being kind of different, from other people, but different in a way that is, as we will see, quite specific. It is the period of childhood. So I don't know what we could define as the sort of boundary. Like, when do we? My brother just sent me a really silly message there, so sorry, I just saw it on the screen. Maybe we could say until we become an adult. So 18 could be the limit, for example. And I think that for me, turning 19 especially, was very formative and represented a big transition, because then I moved to Ireland, and it became something very, I don't know, it was like a new chapter in my life, I think, when that happened. But from the age of 0 until the age of 19, or at least until the age of 18, well, that contains in itself many different phases. But let's try to focus on maybe the child and early teen years. What was distinctive about that for me, and perhaps what did I experience about it as different from the experiences, from my perspective, of other people, including, for example, my friends, but also my own brother, who is an INFP, as you guys might know. What I would say is, what is quite interesting about my childhood is that even though I felt very different, I felt that was probably might have been an early manifestation of Anna, but I felt I just was in my own world all the time, and I was literally living inside my head. When you're a child and you're a young teenager, you have fantasies about various things, and I would be able to just live in those fantasies for a whole afternoon. Sometimes I'd be locked in them. I also remember that sometimes I'd be so locked in them that I would be struggling to get out of them, and this proves sometimes to be difficult in some experiences. For example, this might surprise some people, but I used to play tennis quite well. Not as well as my brother, but I used to play tennis quite well, and to do lots of tournaments. I actually even won some tournaments. But sometimes, I would just spend the whole game thinking about completely something else, and be on kind of autopilot while thinking about some fantasy that just stuck, and I just wouldn't go. It's very vivid. So very extremely vivid imagination, extremely sensitive. But I would say, and this is something that is different from my brother and from a lot of other people and a lot of other kids that might also have felt different. I think there is no doubt that, and we'll see if you guys can relate to this, INFJs among you guys, I was never in any way, shape, or form glorifying this difference. Perhaps these days, now that I'm 32, and perhaps for the last, for as part of this whole like new chapter of my life that I mentioned after moving to Ireland, this has been different, and I've been cultivating this difference. I think that I've been even emphasizing it maybe almost too much during my years in Ireland at times, probably in opposition to the previous phase. And around this time, as I'm sort of in my early 30s now, I'm kind of coming to accept this difference, embrace it, and not place it as something that makes me special. It's just a distinctness of some sort. But when I was a child, I wasn't experiencing that. Paradoxically, I was probably feeling the difference more, because when you're a child and you come to grips with it, you realize that that's going on, and you hadn't experienced it before. It's like this first feeling of like this, being detached from other people, and not exactly knowing what's going on, and not feeling like you're part of any group. You feel like a loner. I mean, essentially, I felt like a big loner. I had friends, and that was very important. But that's the other thing. Even though I was all these things, I was never proud of this difference. I would even say that I was perhaps a little ashamed of it, or at least I regretted it. I would have preferred to be more normal, or to belong more. And in fact, I was visibly, I would say at times, eager to be included in groups. I was willing to make efforts. I was really anxious to be accepted. And you see, that's something that is not as much the case these days, but still probably is, like this experience of wanting to belong and wanting to be accepted, even if it should represent a cost of losing in some uniqueness or whatever you want to call it. That was fine for me. I would have loved to have that happen. Now, it never really happened, and who knows, maybe if it had happened, I would have been like, oh my god, no, I want to sort of keep to my identity or whatever. But I was always very conscious of how I didn't belong, and very eager to try to belong. And that included, being very nice with people, and sometimes perhaps being too nice with people who didn't treat me well, or weren't particularly nice to me. I was never bullied. I was quite early on. I was tall early on, so even from a purely physical point of view, that probably helped. I was seen as kind of, it was a weird mix. Like I was felt different as I became more of a teen. I think that I became also a bit more sort of haughty, or I went through a phase of being a bit arrogant about my endowments or what made me different. Partially probably some kind of defensive mechanism, but still in a very intimate way and very deep way, still very clearly attached to getting on with people, being liked by people, being accepted by people. Probably the early manifestation of FEUs, because if there is one thing that I can clearly say is that I was never indifferent to the opinions of others. Now, no one is, I think we can agree on that, but there are different degrees, but I was always acutely aware of these waves, and I wanted to sort of align with them, and honestly, perhaps my brother was the same, but I don't think he was the same to the same extent. He also had a feeling of being different, and he definitely cultivated it to an extent, but my brother never struck me as being as eager to please or as eager to be included as I was, and paradoxically, I think that when he was a kid, he was more popular than I was, because I think that a lot of kids noticed that he was kind of strong, his difference, but he was kind of wearing it, like a badge, and he had this strong personality and this confidence, and he wasn't willing to make these so-called sacrifices or these like gestures in order to be included. So he had more ease in imposing himself in his difference. Not the kind of person who would impose himself in a group, but impose himself in his difference, and as a result, he kind of became attractive to other kids that were inspired by the attitude that he aspired. And I think that personally as a kid, this could be a skewed vision, but I remember that I was like, oh, my brother is more popular than I am. I am enjoyed by some people, but fundamentally I'm not very important. I'm not very important to other kids, that's my perspective. It took me a while to develop my proper independence, and that took some effort just accepting this difference and owning it. But at the same time, in such a way as not to make these gratuitous sacrifices sometimes that like kind of dissolve your personality and identity a bit, but at the same time also not in a way that's too much the other extreme, which is also a sign of insecurity, where you assert so much that you become arrogant and maybe you berate others a little bit. That's something that is very bad when you're a kid. That's going to ensure your lack of popularity. Some people are going to dislike you, and who knows, perhaps I did go through a phase where I was kind of like, well, I would like more attention, and it's okay if it's a bit negative. But I think that in those cases, if that happened, it stressed me very much quickly. And I realized, oh, actually, I would rather be liked than be, considered important or popular or whatever. And yeah, like I think that throughout my childhood, I felt, in comparison to my brother, I would say that I felt just as different as he did, but I felt he was almost better at accepting it, imposing it, and that it led to sort of my taking more time to assert my own personality, because I was always kind of living inside the heads of other people, trying to figure out what they thought about me instead of me being me straight away. Now, was I nice to everyone? I wouldn't say so necessarily. Again, it was a mix of like wanting to be accepted, but also being quite defensive. Like it's a weird thing, but when some people came and expressed things to me that felt like they were gestures of friendship, but I felt that was not at all me, that they were talking about me as if I were someone else, saying things about me that were just wrong. I was not always capable of just like glossing over it just for the sake of being included in the group. Sometimes I actually reacted quite defensively against it and say, no, that's not at all me. And sometimes I told them to feck off, and then the day after I would try to reconcile and probably send some mixed messages, and came across as quite tortured. But that's my experience. And I would say even as a kid in school, I think that I was always good at school, but I was always kind of eager to follow what the teachers were saying for a long time and remain kind of academic in my approach, even though my NI and I think my potential for originality was already there, and in a way it was crying to be let free, but I was too scared of owning it. And I think there were other people that dared to go along these routes, whereas I was kind of always eager to just follow the rules. It's only when I went to university and really followed my own path that I became like really, I think, shining in terms of my results and in terms of my performance, academically speaking. It took me a while to free myself from the rules. I was very school oriented for a long time. So my rebellion was very internal, and I was struggling to externalize it because I just felt the weight of that need to belong and be part of this network of rules at the same time. Again, probably a manifestation of FE. And so I was, in a way, I was always a good pupil, but I was a late bloomer when it comes to fully asserting, honing, and expressing my potential, I think. Took me quite a while, but eventually I think that I more or less did. Anyway, so I think I'll stop here. I would love to hear what you guys experienced as an INFJ kid or as a kid of another type. Do you relate at all to some of the stuff that I talked about here, or do you not? I just want to hear your perspective. Okay guys, see you soon. I hope this was useful. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on when I publish this video.